We're back in the Beis talking about cool stuff about the Torah. In this week's episode, which we actually recorded before last week's episode, we're talking about stuff relating to biblical stories, the original stories, meaning like Bereshit stories, and what that means, if they were, if we know all the stories or not all the stories. Did they have ups and downs, these human beings that we talk a lot about? All cool things of that nature. I really hope that you enjoy, and next week hopefully we'll be posting the second half of this episode. Thanks, and take a listen. All right, part of the point that I wanted to address, though, is the fact that...
Have we started?
What? Well, could be that we've started.
Could be that we've started. We have no idea.
We have no idea if we've started it yet. We don't even have a name. No, but part of what I wanted to address is the fact that I think people, when you start talking about this stuff, is like, why should I trust something? Why should I trust the Jewish version of history that extends beyond the dude who actually told you this? Meaning, essentially, everything is just hearsay. Let's say Moshe Rabbeinu was a real dude. Obviously, you and I agree on that, right? But let's say there are those out there who question such a thing.
Yeah.
Whether Moshe Rabbeinu was a real dude. But let's say even they concede that point, that Moshe Rabbeinu was a real dude, right? So then you could say, okay, so history from there on maybe could be trusted from a historical perspective.
Right.
But anything beyond that is just pure... He wasn't there. Even by our account, he wasn't there.
Meaning history going backwards in time. Just to be clear that we have context, we're talking about that from the time of revelation, from the time of giving of the Torah. So from that point, we've established, let's say we establish everything as true. And that's when Moshe starts, and that's point zero. So going backwards, there's a whole story that goes beyond that, with starting from creation and going through Adam and Noach and the Mabul and Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and everything in Mitzrayim until you get to Moshe.
Right.
So now the question is that if I accept Moshe as true, if I accept everything that God says in the Torah is true, what does that have anything to do with Bereshit?
Right. And because the idea is that the Jewish tradition as a people and as a tradition both, we make claims that reach much farther back, obviously. Like we're saying, we make claims that reach much farther back than Har Sinai.
Right.
Through the Torah.
Right.
We make claims from literally, you could even sort of call it the Big Bang. Whether it was the Big Bang the way the scientists think the Big Bang happened or not, from the first explosion of matter, creativity in the physical world, we start making claims from there.
Right.
So those who think the Jewish tradition does not reach farther back than Mesopotamian tradition, Egyptian tradition, doesn't really get much farther back than that historically. We do. We make claims that reach farther back than that. I think the timeline on Avram Avinu is obviously Avram Avinu came from the Mesopotamian.
He's, I think, 500 years prior to Matan Torah. I think that's Avram.
I mean, we know that Avram Avinu came towards Israel from like Iraq-ish, which is Mesopotamia,
right? According
to historians' tradition, also, right? So he came down from that civilization, as he grew up in that civilization of those Mesopotamians. But our tradition reaches much farther back than Avram also. Shem, Noah.
Yeah, Adam, whatever it is, wherever Adam ended up. So I would say two things in terms of validation of Sefer Bereshit. I have two answers. I'm not sure which one to say first, so I'm just going to say one. I think the second one will be more enjoyable to talk about. But I think there's two. First of all, I think that when you accept the Torah as true, so you're accepting everything about it. Meaning, if you're going to come and you're going to say that God spoke to Moshe and these are the laws that he gave him, right? And everything after that is true, but everything that he says came about before that is is just fun. God put it in the Torah for fun. I don't think you could say that. I think because first of all, who says that everything that happened afterwards is true either? Moshe's writing this down. He's not. Who says that he conferred with the people that was happening? Maybe some of the events happened, but who says that every single little thing happened even after Matan Torah? If you want to say the laws are true, all you're saying when you say the Torah is true and God gave the Torah to Moshe, all you're saying is that the laws are true. If you want to say that certain stories are true because of the same reason why we believe Matan Torah, because it was such a big event and we would have assumed that our ancestors would have told us about it, so if it's not true, if it is true and we don't know about it, how come we don't know about it if it's such a big event? That's a classic proof of Matan Torah.
Right.
So, you could say that about all the events that happened afterwards also. So Korach's a big event. So that, if it didn't really happen, so we would be like, okay, that's not true. But every single little thing that happens in the Torah, all those little, who says that's true? I think the idea of proving the Torah true is that you're proving that it's a divine gift. And so if you're accepting, we're not working through those proofs right now. But if you've arrived at the point where the Torah is a divine gift, that means that everything about it is true. So it doesn't really matter before or after this point zero of Matan Torah. It doesn't make a difference.
Right.
That's what I would say the first thing.
Right.
The second thing is, and this is a concept which I don't completely understand because I think it's on too large of a scale for us to understand this, but there is a transition, and you see this in the Psukim, and you see this
super large, by the way.
Okay, well then let's see. Oh, our scale is super large. No,
my scale is super large. I have a huge scale. I'm just saying that. I'm throwing that out there.
It's on record.
It's on record that Jude has a huge scale.
So you see very clearly in the Psukim, and Chazal talk about this big time, that there is a transition from Bnei Yaakov to Am Yisrael that happens at some point in Mitzrayim and is completely solidified with Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah.
Right.
So there's one of the big differences between a family and a nation, at least when I just think about it practically, is that families, there's gossip in families, and there's story time with families, and there's a close connection. There's a family value in a nation, in a family. In a nation, it's harder to get that family value because we as Bnei Yisrael all put this on the fact that we were at one point a very small family. That's how we feel a family connection to each other. But in essence, we're a nation that it's a national responsibility, that we have a responsibility to keep the country going and the faith going and all those different things which on a national scale, but that's not on a family scale. But however you say that 500,000 people had a family scale, right? So that's the part that's hard to understand, but the Psukim are very clear that that's how they considered themselves before they left Mitzrayim. It was a family made up of 500,000 people, or 3 million people if you want to extrapolate and do all the math.
Right.
So what that means, though, is that the stories of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are family heirlooms, for lack of a better word. Like, it is a treasure that I've been living in Mitzrayim for 200 years, but I know that God was there and he spoke to Yaakov, who was in Mitzrayim. Yaakov actually lived in Mitzrayim, and Yaakov had a father named Yitzchak, right? And Yitzchak had a father named Avraham, right? And that's where the Jewish people starts.
Right.
So, and I'm sure Avram had met Noach. We know that historically, that if you look at their timelines, that they did meet each other.
Right, they really met each other.
And I don't remember in the timeline if Adam met Noach or not. But
he was definitely alive when Noach was alive.
Mesushalach was alive when Noach was alive. And Mesushalach was the longest of everyone, and Mesushalach had definitely met Adam. So Noach had a concept that went back to Adam. There's no question about it. And Noach met Abraham. So in a family, these stories are very real. And
we know that Noach met Avram?
Yes. I mean, the medrash says that Noach met Avram, but if you look in the timelines of when Noach died and when Avram was born, there is an overlap over there, which before Avraham
turned. Does the medrash say anything about the interaction between Noach and Avram?
If I remember correctly, and I wish I knew the Makar for this, but if I remember correctly, it was an interaction after Avram had already discovered God. Did he meet Shem yet? I don't know. I don't know how that... Shem was in Eretz Yisrael, I think, so I don't know how the exact practicality was. The only time we see... And we don't see Avram meeting Noach at all in the Torah. We do see Avram meeting Shem in the Torah much later on.
Right.
But it was basically Avram discovers God, and whether that's at 3, like one medrash says, whether it's at 50, like the Rambam says, whatever it is, Avram discovers God, and then he goes to seek out other followers of God, and he meets Noach, and Noach gives him, the ground rules, basically. Like that was Abraham's God mentor, and then he eventually meets God himself.
After meeting Noach, really, how much more searching would one need to do? Noach not only being a prophet, which he was, right? But he, had to have a very close relationship with God, being that he was literally the only dude, by our tradition, the only dude in the world alive.
Besides his family. Well, no, I think the next step is having your own personal relationship with God.
Which is what Avram brought about.
Which Avram was able to accomplish. First indirectly, and then actually with a direct connection. But basically, getting back to our topic, I see the stories of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as everyone knew the stories.
They knew the stories before Moshe had told them.
Exactly,
the stories.
And now Moshe's writing it down in the Torah, so Moshe can come and meaning it wasn't a big deal. Everyone knew everything, And the Torah, if you look at Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there really aren't that many small details in there.
There's not many at all. I thought about that a lot. For instance, try and think for a second, the first time Avram really pops onto the scene, according to most of our sources, he's somewhere in his 70s.
Yes.
In his early 70s.
The pasuk says he was 75.
Right.
That's the first time he sees it. Whether or not you want to go...
That's the first time we bump into him.
Right.
Right?
So he's lived a lifetime.
He's lived many days and many hours up until 75. What in the world was he doing from day to day for 75 years? Okay, so we know some stories from a medrash of what he did on particular days.
Right.
We know about the story with the Kivshan Eish, where he was thrown into the furnace by Nimrod.
The Torah only tells us stories that have national significance.
Right, 100%.
Without referencing Yaakov.
But I'm just saying, when a person starts to think about, okay, what even from, let's say, from what we know of this first story of Avram, right, Lech Lecha, when he's 75. The next story we know about Avram Avinu is when he leaves to go down to Egypt.
Right, which I think was 10 years later.
Some odd years later. What in the world was he doing in between?
Right.
And I think it's an important thing to think about, even if you're not interested in coming up with answers what technically he was doing. But it's a fun thing to think about in the sense that he was making proper use of every single day so that when the next story, as far as we're concerned, comes along, he's fitting of that story happening to him. Meaning,
wow, that's
huge events don't happen to normal people.
Right.
You need to be prepared for this event to happen to you. So what was he doing for 10 years? What was he doing for 75 years? He was living a 24-hour lifespan, day to day, making himself a vessel that could handle such an event happening to him in his life. He wasn't expecting these things to happen necessarily. He was in the daily grind, He was in the daily grind, doing his thing, washing his hands, getting up, being tired, rubbing his eyes.
And not talking to God every day.
No, not at all.
For 75 years. I mean, that's the big thing. You think if one story, if the Torah would put in about Avraham, it'd be him finding God. Why would that not be an incredible story to tell everybody? You'd think that would be an important thing.
They didn't tell that story.
But for national significance, it's not significant. For personal significance, it's very important. It's about every person taking their personal journey to find God. But for Am Yisrael, that's not, we know the truth already. So we're working past that. The important thing to know is that, Lech Lecha, that you have to go to Eretz Yisrael, that you have to follow what God tells you, that you have to leave behind your bad influences and only take on new good ones. That's what Lech Lecha is about.
New good influences.
So that's Lech Lecha. Leave behind everything that you've had, which wasn't good for you, and go to the place that's going to be the best place for you, even though you don't know what's happening, because I'm telling you to do that. That's, as a nation, that's what we need to know. I mean, we did the same thing almost in Yetzias Mitzrayim. God tells us that that's what you did in Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? Lechtei hacharai b'midbar, right? Asher lo zarua. You went after me into a place that was desolate. And we get credit for that.
Right. Yeah, Hashem doesn't seem to send people into situations that are, on the surface anyway, any easier for them. Right? Sends us into situations that are new and challenging. The obvious significance there being that a person's not going to really grow in any significant manner, staying in their comfort zone.
Yeah. Nothing happens.
You can conquer a comfort zone. You can conquer that ground and sit there and be rolling at a certain speed. But unless you pick up something new, you won't find out what you're capable of actually doing, continuing to move on.
Right, exactly. If you're not moving forward, then you're dead. If you're not moving forward, then you're moving backwards. And if you're not moving forward or backwards, then you're not going anywhere, which means that you've expired.
Cheers, man.
Yeah, there we go. Get that on tape. Now, the mashal that I was always told is like a heart monitor. A heart monitor goes up and down. So there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. But if it's going down, you're alive. When are you dead? When it flatlines.
Right. That's a good
when
one.
You're not going anywhere.
That's a good one.
But, so that's the idea.
Okay, so like going on the point of like the avos start, you can go, obviously, like we've said, you can go as far back as Adam if you're accepting Moshe Rabbeinu's account of his prophetic account of what exactly happened from then on. But I'm saying these people live daily lives, right?
Right.
Do you think they had ups and downs? I mean, when we let's say, especially the religious crowd, right? When we grow up learning about these people, and even later on, when you actually understand what was going through their mind from Chazal's point of view, they were obviously so conscious, probably we can't really quite grasp how conscious they were and how present they were.
Conscious of what?
Conscious of everything.
You gotta give me a little more.
More than that?
What does that mean, conscious of everything? Saying of where they're holding spiritually, of where they're holding with the people around them, of where they're holding in terms of.
Are you trying to go deep
the
right now?
Boat they're trying to build. I don't know.
Yeah, anything. Meaning because
they're very aware people.
Yeah,
they're very aware. Yeah, of both physical, emotional, spiritual surroundings.
Right.
Good. Great. I got it now.
And the current moment which they're in.
Yeah, including up to and including where they are right now. And
primarily where they are holding right now, because that's like really
right. That's the key.
Anchor. That's the key.
Right.
So, did they have ups and downs? Like, did they make? I mean, I wouldn't say did they make mistakes, but I'm saying did they have down days? Did they have up days?
You mean
or were they
woke up
in such a flow state by the time we meet them?
What do you mean? You mean like? Are you talking about like they one day they woke up and they wanted to turn in their yarmulke, or are you talking about like?
No, like
because we all have days like that.
Well, I kind of think it's super stylish because I have one of these knitted black ones so that I can get in and out of different cultures here in Israel very smoothly.
I just carry different kippahs.
You carry different kippahs?
I have like 3 or 4.
So if you roll out into the settlements, you throw on
I'm ready to go.
The blue circle at the side.
I'm ready to go. I also got
right
my
now
towel.
You're doing the knitted. No, but back to the point.
Yeah. So up and down days. So what do you mean? So. Because I said you think they had days where they turn in their kippahs, and that's where we got into kippahs.
Right. Yeah, so like, for instance, let's say Avram Avinu, right? You think that in those 75 years before we actually meet him, right? By year 75, the dude's a prophet. That's pretty high up there.
Yeah,
that's
arrived.
Legit.
Let's say that's, the ultimate goal.
Right, that's as legit as it's going to get. I mean, granted, there might be different levels of prophecy, but once you're in the prophetic door...
You're doing good.
You're doing good. And if you have had prophecy now and you're listening to this, see somebody, bro.
Or come meet us, because we'd love to meet you.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, we want to know what it's like.
Yeah, right? I'm not saying I haven't had prophetic experiences, but maybe we'll touch on that another time.
All right.
The point is, though, is that at 75, he had a prophetic experience. Did he have days at year 55, you think, where he was like... I'm so out of energy for this. Like, I kind of just want to sit and drink beer and kind of just chill for a minute. Or was you think he was like 24 hours a day, he was sleeping on schedule, was getting up on schedule, he was like, he had his full day planned to the T, like he was rolling at full capacity, non-stop for years on end.
Well, without getting into like the nitty-gritty of which details, like he was good at getting up early, he wasn't good at getting up early.
No, we know he was good at getting up early. Right, because the pasuk says, "Vayash game Avram baboker."
But that was that morning.
That was that morning, but we know that. Right, true.
I'm saying you're welcome to extrapolate it across the entire spectrum, but Chazal tell us that there are 4 people that never sinned.
Right.
Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are not on that list.
Right.
So that means that something must have happened, and not all their sins are public. Moshe's sins are very public.
Right. Well, he didn't do very many of them.
And they're all public. They're all out there. Saying Avram's sins in the Torah, do we see sometime where Hashem tells Avram he did the wrong thing? I don't think we see that. And yet he's not one of the. We
kind of see it hinted at.
Where
Hashem gets a little bit like when he questions Hashem. It says, "Nu, what's up with my kid?"
Yeah, and God doesn't seem to have an issue with that.
Well, he hits him back with a little bit of like, ease up.
Okay, but I don't know.
Like, it's coming.
Yeah, but I don't the Chazal, they don't really point that out as, and even the Psukim doesn't really seem to indicate that there's any tension.
I've seen medrashim that count one of the miscalculations of Avraham Avinu to be putting Sarah in a box.
Yeah, the Ramban says that. The Ramban says that was an Avera.
Right, because he didn't have proper bitachon.
Right.
On his level.
Okay, so according to one opinion, we see something in the Torah, but the Torah doesn't make a big deal out of it. The Torah, right, so in that case, the Torah seems to indicate that maybe this is one of the sins, and the Ramban takes it that way, but there's no mention or whatever. But the point is that, yes, there must have been a day where Avram did something wrong. Now, we know tzaddikim are judged, K'chud they're by the most extreme level that they need to hold themselves to the highest standard possible. But, there's gonna be, something happened. Right. We don't know what it is, but something happened. Now, was it that he got up late for Shacharis, or was it that he wanted to turn in his yarmulke? I prefer the turning in the yarmulke thing, because I just like that line. But
I don't know if he would. Do you think they even wore? No, they didn't wear any. I'm sure they wore some sort of turban.
Well, Mustama, they had some sort of covering because they were in the middle of the desert. But, right. The Gemara seems to say, if you look at the history of yarmulkes and stuff like that.
Didn't really start till much later.
But the tzaddikim and the Talmidei Chachamim always did.
Had head coverings.
Meaning, because you have to cover your head when you're doing a davar shebekdusha. So
right.
when you're davening, when you're making a bracha, going to the mikveh, whatever it is, right? But
probably mad heads back in the day covered their head.
Yeah, and look, we see in the other major religions that
they cover their head too.
Cover their heads. So there's definitely this even though if the regular people don't, the main people do. So if Avram, who Chazal say was the Rebbe essentially because he converted all these people, he must have had his head covered.
Right, probably with a turban. He probably looked dope.
Or I'll second that. He probably looked dope.
No, because there's Chazal that talk. There are sources that say that he wore amulets around his neck.
Yeah, he wore something with the sun. So did that medrash.
Yeah, he probably
put
had
a piece of the sun
staffs.
in a necklace that Avram had.
Piece of the sun?
Yeah, so he could heal people with the necklace because the sun has healing powers.
Right.
I've heard that. I haven't heard that in years. I heard it once, but
basically, he probably looked dope.
Check that off.
A couple points though. That
where are we?
Where are we right now?
Where in the world did this go? Yarmulkes. Okay, so going all the way back.
All the way back to Revelation.
The two answers that I would say to your question. The first one is just that I think if you're accepting the word of God in terms of the laws and contained in this book, so you're also accepting all the circumstances that surround the laws in the book. Because the same way you could say that the stories beforehand didn't happen, you could also say the ones afterwards didn't happen. All the stories are in the same boat.
Right.
That would be the first answer I would say.
Right.
Second thing I would say, and this one I like better, I think it's more of a discussion thing, is that Bnei Israel have made this transition from large family to nationhood, right? But as a family, you hear the family stories, you hear the family legends, all these things. So Bnei Israel knew all these stories. I would say they knew all these stories. And basically, Moshe's filling in the exact details.
But they knew that God. These things had happened to their grandparents.
This is stories they had heard for years and years and years, and going up.
I think if your granddad was a prophet, you would probably know. Like your dad would tell you, oh, by the way, granddad was a prophet.
Yeah, and we're only going back. Yoshua was born at the end when they left Mitzrayim, right? And he was a great grandson of Ephraim.
Binyamin.
Of Ephraim.
Binyamin. I think it's Binyamin.
I think it's Ephraim. Get out your phone.
All right, we'll check this out.
I think it's Ephraim.
No, I think it's Binyamin because only Binyamin can destroy Amalek. Because Binyamin was...
Did Yoshua destroy Amalek?
No, but he was tasked with destroying Amalek for a reason.
It was a combination of Yosef and Binyamin. That's the story.
All right, we have our first official argument.
Yeah, I think it was... But either way, he's only 4 generations removed from the people who came down to Mitzrayim.
Right.
So it's really not a long time. Like, I've met 4 generations in my life. So, like, even if he didn't meet it, it's really not that long a time. Moshe's a third generation from Levi.
Who knew somebody.
Moshe's a third. It's Levi, Yocheved, Moshe.
Right.
So it's really not that long of a generation gap. They could have heard the stories. So that's what I would say. Like, they knew these stories, meaning it wasn't something that they had to really prove. Like, did everyone know every single detail? That I'm not gonna say they for sure did. But I'm definitely willing to accept the fact that these were very common stories that everyone knew, and no one had an issue believing them.
Right, because they knew the story.
Right.
Then it just got written down by Moshe in detailed form. Well, in also in coded form. In the sense that it's going to encoded in these stories are a lot more information that have been extrapolated by our previous sages.
Yes, 100%. But what the Torah wanted us to know, they put in.
Right. Think they knew other stories about their grandparents?
That's what I was just thinking now. Like, it could be they knew a million other things. Maybe they knew the time about how Grandpa Abraham turned in his kippah. I'm going back to that well way too often. But,
yeah. No, it could be they knew the stories about the time that Avram had met this certain king or whatever like that. And,
right.
And they had a great conversation or whatever it was, and they decided to be friends.
The truth is, I do believe that. I believe that midrashim, and this is also a whole other topic, but I think the midrashim, it's not like the sages saw a pasuk, because all the midrashim come from psukim. That's why they quote psukim.
Right.
It's the wording in the psukim, okay, we learned this story.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't think it's
all Torah Shabbal Peh. All midrashim is Torah Shabbal Peh.
Right, so exactly.
It's all given to Moshe on Har Sinai.
So I really think that they knew the story, and they knew the pasuk, and they just had to figure out the connection. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Meaning they knew the story already. So it wasn't like someone came and said, "Oh, because there's an extra vav in this pasuk, I'm going to come up with an entire story about how Avram killed the giant serpents."
No,
that's
yeah,
not
they
what
knew
happened.
the story.
Like, they knew the story,
right?
And like, oh, that's really cool. How Hashem hints to it in the Torah.
Right.
That's basically what a story in the medrash is.
That's interesting. It's not you're saying it's not that they learned it out from the Torah.
Because I think that's impossible. It's not like because there's an extra vav or because there's an extra word there.
They can't make up a story.
You're going to come up with a whole story?
No, they knew the story and then they found where it was encoded.
Mm-hmm. And right. Once you know the story, it becomes a lot easier to find these codes.
To find the code. Right. Nice.
Yeah, that's how I learned it out.
And maybe one day we'll get into the whole midrashim topic of whether these, how exactly to understand different midrashim.
Yeah,
I think the Harav Kramer deals with this.
Oh.
The Vilna Gaon.
The Gaon Harav Kramer?
The Gaoner of Kramer.
Zatzal?
Yeah. Revelation, though.
You wanted to talk about how you were talking about on the phone, how you want to talk about how the impact of Moshe being the prophet, something in terms of that, something that now like we're kind of solidifying the whole Torah. Well, that's what we just talked about.
Yeah, there's a theory out there. Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but just people know I don't give credence to this theory at all. That the whole burning bush thing was this plant that's found in the Sinai area, which is super psychedelic. Basically, all of Klal Yisrael, first Moshe ate from the plant, and he had this crazy thing, this crazy trip.
Yeah.
You've heard about this?
Yeah. Rabbi Kellerman, in his famous speech about the Revelation, discusses that. He says, why don't we just say that everyone had a crazy drug trip?
Right.
So, the reason why he brushes it off is because, I think his thing is that no one else ever tried to do that. The whole idea of history is that history repeats itself. And you look throughout history and there's themes that go through every single thing. And no one ever pulled the giant drug trip deal.
Right.
No one tried to do a drug trip with 3 million people. The closest,
except for the Grateful Dead.
Except for the Grateful Dead.
But they only came out with stopping the Vietnam War.
Did you ever see that movie? It's a Steve Carell movie, and he plays this out of luck magician. I saw it on a plane.
Saw it.
And basically, the final trick, spoiler alert, the final trick at the end of the movie is
spoiler alert. If you haven't seen
this movie yet, they have, it's called the disappearing audience, or the transporting audience. And basically,
I have seen this movie.
They drug the entire audience, and they all fall asleep.
Right,
and they carry them all out to the fields. And they set them up, and then they wake them up. And they're like, "Oh, we transported you." And they're like, "Okay, we have to get back to the theater." Okay. So they drug everybody again. They fall asleep, and they're throwing people in the truck. One guy bruises his face, so they have to cover it up with makeup, so he doesn't see that he bruised his face. So yeah, exactly. That's
basically the start of Judaism.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. So that's why no one tried to do that. I think that's why he talks about it way at the end of the speech, and by that time he's already focused on his killer ending, which his killer ending is that he has a doctorate in religions, and he says he had a lot of friends who were doing history.
This is Rav Kellerman we're talking about.
Yeah.
Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman.
Yeah.
Just to give him a shout out.
Yeah. Shout out to Rabbi Kellerman. All the good work he does.
Yeah, he does good work.
So yeah, that's basically his big killer at the end is that the Torah tells us in Sefer Dvarim, and I wish I had it in front of me. Torah tells us in Sefer Dvarim that it describes Matan Torah, it describes Har Sinai, and it says that no one's ever going to claim this again.
Right.
And it's been 3,000 years, and no one has claimed
that.
Right. And he tells a story of how he met this one of these guys from one of these Eastern religions, and basically the guy says, yeah, we have a story that this is what happened, but they all died.
Wait, what?
Meaning it's this very ancient religion, and basically the guy says that they have this tradition where they had a Matan Torah, essentially. They had a revelation in front of 1 million people. And Rabbi Kalman's like, so what happened next? Oh, and they were so scared that they all died. So Rabbi Kalman's like, so what happened next? And he's really excited.
And then it was one dude who
and
started something.
So he's like, what do you mean? They were dead. So he's like, so how did anyone know the story? He's like, oh, well, the God came to another guy 100 years later and told him the story, and that's whatever. So it essentially goes back to the same thing. But
hashtag BS.
Right, exactly. That is the classic proof. I think it's brought as far back as the Kuzari brings the proof that 3 million people seeing something, if it didn't really happen, someone would have said something at some point, instead of going
Or it's not that hard to think to yourself, okay, how can I make something that is going to be believed by many people for generations to come? Oh, well, why don't we just have a mass revelation? Because that's a pretty darn good proof.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to think about.
But no one does it because it's ridiculous. Because if you're going to say that 1,000 people saw it, well, where did they all go? It's just you here now.
Right.
It's one guy bringing the Torah, their Torah, Torah with a lowercase t, to the people, and it's just him. It's just Bob. There's no one else around there. So
or who's the Mormon dude?
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith. It's the most American name I've ever heard.
What did he do? He found the book and he found the glasses, and he destroyed the book and he destroyed the glasses. That's what he told everybody.
Dick.
Talk about a trip.
Those would have been.
He was in Utah also,
expensive.
so it's a lot more.
Why didn't he save them and sell them on the black market?
Because they never existed, dude. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, because he could have made a lot of money off it.
He could have made a lot of converts off of that, I think.
True.
You know, he found a new Bible. You know how I know Mormonism isn't true? Because South Park said they were true. Once South Park says Mormonism is the true religion, I know that
it's not.
It's like, then you know it's the most ridiculous thing possible. It's like they have this scene where everyone's like, you know, in the afterlife, and they're like, so which religion was true? Right? And he's like, it was the Mormons. The Mormons got it right. And you're like, okay, now I know I can never believe the Mormons ever again.
They've gotten South Park's approval. I just started, I don't know why, but I just started watching like 4 to 5 minute clips again of Family Guy. It's a gigantic 4 to 5 minute waste of time, but it's so funny. Seth MacFarlane is fantastic.
Brilliant guy.
He really is brilliant.
And very talented.
Yeah, he put out a jazz album. The dude sings jazz.
I know he sings. I didn't know he put out like an album.
He put an album. I think the story goes basically that even like there's like some microphone, a studio microphone that Sinatra used to use, and like somebody was like, "Hey, why don't you use Sinatra's microphone, like the actual microphone, to do a jazz album?" And McFarlane's like, "I can't turn that down." So he did he did a jazz album. He's very good.
He's awesome.
He's a good
singer. You see him like singing. I've seen him sing like musicals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's insane. His voice is so good.
I remember seeing once that in Family Guy episodes when they do their little like their numbers, their musical numbers. There's like a full orchestra in house.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that they record like a full 30, 40, 50 piece like orchestra.
And he arranges it.
I'm assuming he arranges the basic number, and then they probably fill it out and make it and spread it out to different instruments. But
That's insane. So why did you bring up Family Guy? Because I wrote a South Park.
Yeah, the point is though that he's a genius.
Yeah, he's
McFarlane.
definitely a genius.
Not Jewish though. One of the few geniuses out there who is not Jewish.
Yeah, not Jewish. Not Jewish.
Neither is Elon Musk, by the way.
Right.
Jews really, they try hard to. We the Jewish people try hard to bring these people into the fold. My wife and I have talked about that for a while. How Jews have been trying to adopt Kate Middleton for the longest time. She's not Jewish, folks.
Very long time. Yeah, not happening.
And now they're trying again with the new one, Meghan Markle.
What?
Yeah, they're trying.
What?
Maybe her dad is African American, her mom is Jewish, maybe, or something like that. Okay, so are you down to go deep now into how one might attain prophecy, and then therefore, obviously we can't attain prophecy nowadays, right? But
Correct.
how might somebody engage in the idea that this is possible, where it's tangible to them that this is possible, knowing full well that they can't reach it, but be able to taste enough of it
so I'm
that they
so
can be
down
like,
for that.
"Oh, okay, I get it. There's a lot more there."
I'm so down for that.
Yeah.
I've written a 21-page outline on it.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it's a totally separate topic.
Is it? But we're talking about Revelation.
So, but we're talking about Har Sinai though, the significance of Har Sinai.
Right, but it all. Right,
so let me just say the point that I thought we could say, and so you could ask the question why was Revelation necessary? I think that's a good question. In terms
that's a very good question.
Right. Meaning we've as we've spoken, we've had prophets before this, right? We believe Moshe. What's the idea about Revelation? So,
well, here's a good way to segue into that, which is this is something that atheists will talk about, right? It's like if the world were to be destroyed today, right, and all the literature with it, and for some reason the internet went out, right? What are those things called? EMPs?
Yeah.
Right, those electromagnetic pulses that shut down everything. Whatever. Something happened where there's no internet, can't find a book, and there's like, whatever, there's a handful of dudes. They might not even know that there's another handful of dudes out there, right? It could be women too, people. The point is that there's no more religion. There's no more book.
Right.
There's nothing.
No, nothing.
So the atheists will say, well, okay, so it might take you another 3,000 years, but you'll be able to get back to, genetics. You'll be able to get back to...
Eventually you'll make your way back.
You'll make your way back to scientific discovery.
It'll take a long time, but you'll make your way back.
Right. But you won't make your way back to, Chamishe Chumshe Torah. You won't make your way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, to
the crazy
Moses
thing is,
giving the Torah.
We do believe that they will.
Exactly. That's one of the points that I've thought about when hearing these discussions of like Sam Harris or whatnot, or Hitchens. I hate Hitchens. Why does he's such like a... Can I say this on air? Are we on air?
We are on air.
Can I say...
You've already said that. Not about him, but like in general.
Oh, I've said it.
So we'll decide. We'll decide
whether it gets edited out.
But anyway, we now have your thoughts on Mr. Hitchens.
Yeah. No, just because these people are very like...
No, they're biased. They have an opinion.
Well, it's just like if we're gonna have a comment, treat it with respect. Like, come and discuss with respect the fact that they're just on a basic level that there are people who are sitting across from you who don't agree with what you're saying, and who hold in high esteem of something else. Like, don't be a complete like. What's a better term for it than the words that I'm thinking of? Because they're all 4 letters.
I'll just put in a beep and we'll assume you said something.
All right. No, but that's their point. So go further into that. Why do we believe that we actually would come back there?
So the whole story of Abraham is that Abraham looked at the world around him and said, "This doesn't make sense." Right. And we believe that, we say that the avos kept the Torah. A lot of people make a mistake in this, or that they knew the Torah. A lot of people make the mistake, and this is so frustrating to me because it's really stupid. That people think, oh, the avos knew the Torah, so they knew all the stories. So why didn't they just open the book and say, hey, Yosef, don't go there because your brother's going to sell you down to Mitzrayim. Okay, Torah is not the stories, huh?
It's like those horror movies where you're like, don't go into the forest, you retard.
Never go into the forest. Take a flashlight.
Yeah, take a flashlight, bring a friend, call 911.
Something,
don't go alone.
Cell phone batteries are not as good as they used to be.
Right.
Just make sure your phone's charged.
Yeah,
that's all I'm going to
least.
say. Yeah, just something. Okay,
tell your friend to track your iPhone before you head into the forest.
Something. It's smart. Just be smart.
Be a little practical here, guys.
But what were we talking about?
I know you're in a horror movie, but seriously, there's a dude with an axe in the forest.
Where should we run? To our car, which is running and full of gas, or into the garage with all the knives? Where should we go to?
Let's go to
the car. Go to the car. That's the smart one. So anyway, the idea is the Torah is not a storybook. When it says the avos knew the Torah, they didn't know the stories. Okay, they didn't know the future. It means that they knew the laws. That's what Torah is. Torah is laws. That's what Torah is. But
laws, I think there might even be a possibly a better way to put it than laws. The Torah is, because when you say laws, like flush it out. What do you mean by laws?
Meaning when we define Torah, in fact, when you see different times in the Torah, it calls different laws Toros.
Right, true.
There are certain styles of laws which are specifically called Torah. Torah means like a teaching or stuff like that. So it's not about, you don't teach stories, you tell stories. Torah is about teaching. The point of the Torah is to teach us things, right? So the avos, they couldn't learn anything from things that didn't happen yet. So like it wasn't the stories. I get so frustrated when people
100%
bring that
me
point
too.
up. It's such a ridiculous point.
There are good questions I've come across in my mind and that I've been asked on that particular topic, but we can deal with that another time. Okay, so let's keep it basic right now. The idea is that, so we believe, what does it mean that they knew the Torah? That they were able to figure out different laws that just made sense from if you keep, meaning that if you would keep figuring out what morality is and what true morality is, and you kept testing things and you kept developing the ideas, you would eventually come upon the Torah.
and its
Right.
laws. That would be your end result.
Which is what Abraham Avram Avinu did.
Right. Did he get all 613? I don't know. But that's what he did. And then he got to a point where he, by himself, without a Torah, without a written version of the Torah, God came to him. Right. So he was able to do it the best.
Which wasn't the first time God came to somebody.
Right. But he came with no prior teachings. Like, Adam was created from God. Noach, it's a big discussion of why he was the one to receive prophecy. But Avram, according to what the medrash says, developed it all on his own.
Right.
He got there on his own.
I think it's in my opinion, like the laws. When we say laws, right, a lot of people will take that to mean like, I don't know. When I think of laws, and a lot of times one of the first things that comes next into my head is responsibilities, right? And sometimes that comes with like a drag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know 100%. What I mean? So I think more than let's say Avram Avinu discovered the laws. You may not agree with me on this. You may agree with me on this. That like he discovered the reality of how he can input into the world and get out truth. Like laws of like nature, right? Laws of science, right? If I can.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if he was a physicist or anything like that.
I think he was a hardcore physicist.
Well, we say that he wrote, if he wrote Sefer Yetzirah, then I guess he did. If he wrote there's a Kabbalistic work called the Book of Creation in English, right. So it happens to be that. But I don't know if that's necessary. Even if that's true, that's not necessarily necessary for discovery of God, is it? I don't think so. I think it's a tremendous understanding of God, but like if I'm teaching somebody the ways of God, I don't need to tell them all that. It's a higher understanding.
It is a higher understanding, but it's the reality nonetheless. No, meaning I'm saying that all things being connected, I think I'm about to try and jump off the deep end here.
Yeah.
I may sink.
Okay. I'll pick you back up.
Yeah, but like when Avram Avinu discovered all the laws through looking, this is a big thing for me because it deals with the question that we were dealing with a second ago of the atheists bring, right? Which is that I can rediscover science without any preconceived notions on God. Which maybe you could ask questions on that, maybe not. But the point is well taken, right? Because you can't rediscover a mass revelation. You can't rediscover the Torah.
Right.
But we're saying obviously that you can. How can you do that? Because the Torah, and when we say Torah, we mean the laws of the Torah, are implanted into the reality of the world. So if you can watch and pay attention closely enough to all of your interpersonal interactions, right? To all of your interactions with nature, which essentially is what a scientist is trying to do.
Right.
Pay attention.
Right.
Right? And see patterns.
Right.
If you pay attention closely enough, you will come to, I mean, maybe not me and you, but if you're, essentially the idea is there that it's possible.
Right.
To come to the Torah. And what do we mean by the Torah? We mean the reality of what you're living with.
Right.
And that could mean something as basic as like, okay, now is the time not necessarily to openly tell the truth, meaning not to lie, but I'm going to refrain from saying something right now. Why? Why would you refrain? Because it's going to hurt that person. Why is that bad? Because I've paid attention long enough to know the reality of that situation.
That's more than what I just see.
Right.
It just has to be that way.
But it requires a lot of paying attention and a lot of sensitivity and a lot of understanding.
Crazy awareness.
Right.
Yeah. You have to have an ultimate person, which is essentially what Avram was. Yeah, that's what he was. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. That's it for this week's episode of Back of the Beis. We'll be back next week with part 2 of our Revelation conversation. In the meantime, you can check out the blog, backofthebeis.blogspot.com. We're also available on YouTube. Just search for Back of the Beis. All the files are put up as YouTube video files. You could also message me and Yehuda on Facebook either Yosef Siegel or Yehuda Rabinowitz. I am also available on Twitter at Kumzitzguy. That's Kumzitz, guy, at Kumzitzguy. And we're trying to get on iTunes. We're working on that in the next couple weeks to make that happen. So we'll speak to you next week in the back of the base.